My earliest memories of Steve Isaacs, what were they? Watching him camp on the far block on that hard gold floor at Old Schilling to wait for a rebound that was going to come off the backside. I don't know how many times that worked for him that first year, but he did have the highest offensive rebound season of his career with 157. I bet half of those came off that backside block. I remember most that he could not be moved once he got to that block, no matter what the opposing player did to knock him off of his spot. Steve was built low to the ground and took advantage of that. He could certainly jump, as you could see in the photos that were in his intro video, but his forte was waiting for the ball to come down to him and beating his opponent back to the rim. Since that opponent likely had jumped, he just waited for him to come back down, and as he was coming down, he went up and scored. His first college coach, Dale Gibson, recalls that Steve was not extremely fleet of foot or quick, somewhat of an understatement, but he was exceptionally fundamental as a player. His footwork was superb, he boxed out very well, and best of all, just held his position when he got there. He set some really mean picks to get others open. He was a total team player and completed our starting lineup that year. That first year for Steve was one of the most successful Flames basketball seasons prior to Liberty's recent hoop success. He played with two Hall of Famers, Ed Vickers and Carl Hess. Their team rolled up 28 victories that year, defeating Point Loma College to win the NCCAA National Championship by 3 points in a game played in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Steve's sophomore year would be a rebuilding year, and one most would not remember fondly. The Flames managed only 5 wins in 1981, but turned it around the next year with 15 wins as Steve's second college coach took over the program. Jeff Meyer would coach at Liberty for 17 years, the longest tenured coach in the program. Coach Meyer said, Steve, he was absolutely our anchor. He was a no-maintenance kind of guy, and best of all, what Coach Meyer said about him, he was solid. The stage was set for a breakout senior season for Steve Isaacs, who was the team captain and unquestioned leader of the team. The Flames reeled off 23 wins and played 3 rounds into the NAIA National Championship, finishing in a tie for 5th place. You really think 5th is a big deal? Well, keep in mind that 32 district champions gathered together at Kemper Arena in Kansas City, a 16,000-seat arena. It's the same arena that the next week would host the Big 8 championships, and the crowds legitimately were very big. And their loss in that final game came by just 1 point to a team called Chaminade. You say, well, who in the world is Chaminade? Well, first, they were a team from Hawaii that was ranked number 1 in the tournament. Second, earlier that year, they had defeated Virginia. Yeah, the one 65 miles up the road. Third, that was the same Virginia that was ranked number 1 in the country at the time Chaminade beat them and was led by a little guy named Ralph Sampson. At one point, a 1-point loss to a giant killer was one for the ages. Meyer said, the big guy was our horse at the NAIA Nationals. We just fed it inside to him for layups, and when they stopped that, he just kicked it back outside to Greg McCauley or Eric Gordon to shoot. He was a heck of a passer, and those guys believed every shot they took was a good one, right, Greg? All you had to do was to be able to see the rim, and so therefore it was a good shot. A story I heard from Coach Meyer showed how those exploits almost didn't have a chance to happen. Steve liked country music and listened to in his car all the time. One day when he left his car, he left the radio station tuned in, and somebody noticed it and turned him into the dean's office. Yeah, back in those days, that was somewhat of an issue. He was summoned to receive his punishment, but he had an advocate to go in with him. Jim Moon was Dr. Falwell's right-hand man in those days at the church, and he was a big country music fan. Those of us that know him know how true that was. He sat in the dean's office with Steve, and when it was all done, there was no discipline handed out. This 2-time All-American married a Liberty girl, Vicky. Her home was in Alaska, so guess where they settled? You got it, Alaska. All the way across the continent. Steve's boss at Watterson Construction, Bill Watterson, called me the day after I had the privilege of informing Steve that he had been selected for the Hall of Fame. He wanted me to understand just how valuable Steve was to their company as their director of safety. But even more, he wanted me to know what he thought of him as a person of tremendous character. Steve Isaacs certainly has America covered, came to the East Coast from his home in Ohio, then settled for a lifetime impact in Alaska. I present to you your next Hall of Fame inductee using the nickname his teammates lovingly gave him when they played with him. Please welcome Waterhead to the podium tonight.